If you've made it this far, before we begin this story, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. That way, you'll receive new videos as soon as they're published, and it also motivates us to keep bringing real and inspiring stories like this one. Now take a deep breath, get comfortable, and prepare to dive into the life of Anna. A woman who, like so many others, never imagined she would have to give up everything for her child. Anna lived in a small coastal town in the northeast of the United States. The narrow streets, lined with old wooden houses painted in pastel tones, carried that nostalgic air of a place where time seemed to move slowly. The ocean breeze brought with it a constant salty smell that mixed with the aroma of local cafes and bakeries serving warm croissants early in the morning. It was a beautiful place, but far too small for big dreams. And Anna, until not long ago, believed her life would flow quietly, without major highs or lows. She was 28 years old and worked as a receptionist at a dental clinic. The job wasn't the best, but it paid the bills and gave her a stable routine. Monday through Friday, from 8 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon, Anna greeted patients, answered phone calls, and kept a smile on her face, even when she was tired. Outside of work, she liked to spend her time reading novels, walking on the beach at sunset, and dreaming about the future. That future, until recently, had included Mark. He was 2 years older, with brown hair always in a mess and a carefree way about him that had first charmed her. Mark worked at a small auto repair shop he had inherited from his father, and he spoke with passion about fixing engines as if it were an art. Anna remembered clearly the first time she saw him, leaning over the hood of an old car, his hands covered in grease, and that wide smile on his face. The beginning of their relationship had been intense. Mark seemed like the very embodiment of freedom. While Anna liked routines and security, he spoke of hitting the road, of traveling with no destination, of not being tied to anything. They were opposites, but somehow, they completed each other. Anna's parents, however, never trusted Mark much. They said he was immature, irresponsible, not the kind of man to build a family with. But Anna, in love, ignored their advice. She believed love was enough, that together they could overcome any obstacle. And for a while, that was how it was. But life has a curious way of testing the convictions we swear to hold. The news of her pregnancy came on a spring afternoon. Anna was sitting in the small bathroom of her apartment, holding in her hands a pharmacy test that showed 2 pink lines. Her heart was beating so fast she could barely breathe. It was a mixture of fear, joy, and disbelief. She had always wanted to be a mother, but she hadn't expected it to happen so soon, nor at a time when her life still felt unstable. When she told Mark, she expected support, maybe even tears of joy. But what she saw was different. He stayed silent for long seconds, running his hand through his hair, pacing back and forth. Finally, he murmured, "This isn't what I had planned, Anna." That sentence echoed in her mind for days. He didn't say he didn't want the baby. He didn't say he wouldn't be there. But those words carried a weight that made her feel alone, even with him by her side. Still, Anna decided she would move forward. There was a life growing inside her, and that was bigger than any doubt. The following months were a whirlwind. Anna's body was changing, her clothes no longer fit, and the morning sickness left her exhausted. At work, Her colleagues celebrated the news, sharing advice and excitement, but at home the atmosphere was different. Mark seemed distant. He went out with friends more often, spent longer hours at the garage, and when he was around, he rarely spoke about the baby. Anna tried to convince herself it was only fear, that he just needed time to process it, that once he held their child in his arms, everything would change. That summer, the heat was stifling. Anna was 6 months pregnant when she had a serious argument with Mark. They were in the kitchen of their small apartment. She had prepared a simple dinner, but Mark arrived late, tired, and barely touched the food. "You can't keep ignoring this," Anna said, her voice trembling. "Our child will be born in just a few months, and you act as if nothing has changed." Mark sighed, dropping his silverware forcefully onto the table. "I'm trying, Anna. But I didn't ask for this. I wasn't ready." The words cut like a knife. Anna felt tears welling up, but she swallowed them down. That night, she realized something she had avoided admitting until then: she was alone in this journey. Even so, she carried on. She pushed forward, because she believed a mother cannot afford to give up. On the day her son was born, everything changed. The labor was long and painful, but when she heard that first cry, the world seemed to stop. It was a boy. Small, fragile, but perfect. Anna held him in her arms and cried like never before. That defenseless little being was now her reason to live. She named him Daniel. Mark was there, but his distant gaze did not go unnoticed. He held the baby, forced a smile, but Anna knew that something inside him was absent. The first months were the hardest. Daniel cried through the nights, Anna's milk took time to come in, and the sleepless nights left her exhausted. Yet there were magical moments too: his first smile, the way he clutched her finger, the warmth of his tiny body pressed against her chest. While Anna gave herself completely to the role of mother, Mark drifted further and further away. He left early, came home late, and soon began spending weekends away. When Anna confronted him, he would say he needed space, that he didn't know how to handle the pressure. It was during this time that Anna began to understand what it meant to give up herself. Her days revolved entirely around Daniel. Work, rest, leisure, everything else was pushed aside. She lived for her son, and though there was love in that, there was pain too. One night, as she rocked Daniel in her arms, alone in the small room lit only by the glow of a bedside lamp, Anna thought, "Am I ready to carry this alone for the rest of my life?" The days that followed that solitary thought were like an emotional roller coaster. There were mornings when she woke up to Daniel smiling in his crib, and it all seemed worth it. But there were also endless nights when he cried without stopping, and she, exhausted, felt her body trembling from fatigue. Mark, meanwhile, had become little more than a shadow in their home. He came in late, often smelling of beer, and avoided long conversations. When Anna tried to talk about bills, about buying diapers, about Daniel's vaccines, he would answer with short, clipped words or change the subject. One afternoon, Anna found him sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the turned-off television. The silence was heavy. She walked closer with Daniel in her arms. "Won't you at least try?" she asked softly. Mark lifted his tired eyes. "Try what?" "To be a father. To be present. He needs you." "I need you." Mark sighed and rubbed his face. "I don't know how to do this, Anna. I don't know how to be the person you want me to be." It was in that moment she realized Mark didn't want to learn. He didn't want to try. And the loneliness she already felt became painfully real. The months that followed only deepened the distance. Until one Sunday morning, Mark walked out with a backpack slung over his shoulder. He said he needed some time, that he'd be back in a few days. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into a permanent absence. Anna cried. She cried like she never had before. But deep down, she knew it had always been written between the lines. Now, it was just her and Daniel. And that was the point when the real sacrifices began. Anna tried to go back to work at the clinic when Daniel was only 3 months old. She had no choice, bills were piling up. But she quickly realized the routine was nearly impossible. The baby was still nursing, cried constantly, and the babysitter she had found did not inspire trust. After 2 weeks of trying to balance everything, Anna made a drastic decision. She quit her job. It felt like cutting off her own wings. The paycheck wasn't much, but it meant independence, dignity. Still, when she looked into Daniel's fragile eyes, she knew she couldn't take the risk. With her savings, Anna managed to survive for a few months. She sold some furniture, cut expenses, and learned to live with the bare minimum. Every grocery trip was calculated. Every cent counted. Even so, there were moments of beauty. Anna discovered a strength she had never imagined she possessed. She discovered she could stay awake 3 nights in a row and still find the energy to smile when Daniel took his first steps. She discovered that a mother's love is built on sacrifice, but also on silent miracles. One day, while pushing the stroller down the narrow streets of town, Anna noticed how people looked at her. Some with pity, others with judgment. She felt the weight of those stares. But when she looked down at Daniel, laughing as he held a simple toy, a wave of pride washed over her. Yes, she was giving up everything. But she was doing it for him. Time passed, and Daniel turned 1. They had a small celebration, just her, her parents, and a close neighbor. Anna baked a simple cake, decorated the apartment with cheap balloons, and sang happy birthday with tears in her eyes. Daniel wouldn't understand the meaning of that moment, but for her it was victory. That night, after everyone had left and the apartment returned to silence, Anna sat on the couch with Daniel asleep in her arms. Her eyes drifted toward the window, reflecting the contrast between the life she now had and the dreams she once carried. Travels, career, stability, all of it seemed so far away. But then she looked at her son and whispered, "I would trade it all again, Daniel. Everything." And in that instant, she realized she had found a purpose greater than any plan she had ever made. Winter came early that year, bringing with it a biting cold that seemed to cut through walls and windows. Anna wrapped Daniel in layers of clothing, improvising thicker blankets with old fabrics she had stored away. The heating bill climbed month after month, and she knew that soon she would have to choose between keeping the house warm or putting food on the table. The days grew long and heavy. Without steady work, Anna began taking small odd jobs, babysitting neighbors' children when needed, doing occasional cleaning, even selling homemade sweets to make a little extra money. None of it was enough, but it was all she could manage to offer. At night, when Daniel finally fell asleep, she would sit on the kitchen floor, rest her head on her knees, and cry in silence. She cried from exhaustion, from Mark's absence, from the feeling of having lost her own identity. And at the same time, she cried out of gratitude for having Daniel there, healthy, breathing deeply by her side. People around her talked. People always talk. Some neighbors praised her courage, but others whispered about how reckless it was to have a child without being prepared. Anna pretended not to hear, but each comment felt like a stone pressing against her chest. Her parents helped when they could, but they lived in another town and had struggles of their own. They offered moral support, weekly phone calls, and sometimes sent a small amount of money. Anna was grateful, but deep inside, she felt ashamed. Over time, the responsibilities began to weigh heavier than she could carry. She barely slept, ate irregularly, and her body showed signs of exhaustion. The deep circles under her eyes revealed her sleepless nights, and the constant pain in her back reminded her that the body has limits. One night, as she laid Daniel in his crib, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman reflected back at her did not look like the same one she had once been. The sparkle in her eyes had dimmed, her hair was unkempt, and her smile had become rare. Anna stepped closer to the mirror and murmured, "Who are you now?" The answer came silently, but clearly. She was a mother. A mother who gave up everything to make sure her son had a chance. Even so, there were days when the loneliness felt unbearable. Anna longed to talk to another adult, to laugh without worry, to have even a moment for herself. She remembered the nights when she would read books in peace or walk leisurely along the beach. Now, every step of her life was calculated around Daniel. But every time she thought of giving up, of surrendering to despair, all it took was looking into her son's eyes. Those wide, curious eyes that gazed at her as if she were his entire world. That was what kept her standing. One day, leaving the market with heavy bags in her hands and Daniel in his stroller, Anna was approached by an elderly woman. The lady watched her for a few seconds and then said, "You are stronger than you think." Anna froze. She didn't know the woman, but the words cut deep. She smiled shyly, thanked her, and continued walking with tears streaming down her face. That night, she wrote in an old notebook, "Maybe I don't have everything, but I have enough to go on. Strength is this, to keep going when no one sees." It was the first time Anna had written down her thoughts. And without realizing it, she began a habit that would help her survive the darkest days. The journal became her refuge. In its pages, she poured out fears, confessed insecurities, but also recorded small victories. "Daniel took his first steps today," he said. "Mama, I managed to pay all the bills this month." Those little notes were anchors. Proof that, despite the weight, she was still moving forward. Winter seemed endless. The snow-covered streets made for a pretty picture for tourists, but for Anna it only meant more cold inside her home and more difficulty taking Daniel out. She did her best to keep the apartment warm, but she couldn't always pay every bill. Sometimes she used only portable heaters in the rooms, focusing on keeping the minimum space warm so her son wouldn't suffer. It was on one of those freezing nights that Daniel began to cough. At first, Anna thought it was just a common cold. She gave him warm tea, added more blankets, and kept him close to her chest so he could breathe better. But by the third day, the cough had turned into wheezing, and his little body burned with fever. Panic set in. Anna knew she had to take him to the hospital, but she also knew the medical bills would be nearly impossible to pay. Even so, she didn't hesitate. She grabbed her coat, wrapped Daniel in blankets, and headed for the emergency room, walking quickly through the snow. At the hospital, the doctors saw him immediately. The diagnosis: severe bronchitis. He needed nebulizations and observation. Anna held her son's tiny hand while he cried, her heart breaking with every difficult breath he took. They stayed in the hospital for 2 days. Anna didn't leave Daniel's side for a second. She slept on a hard chair next to his bed, eating only what she managed to bring in small containers. When they were finally discharged, the hospital bill came with them. Anna looked at the amount and felt her legs weaken. It was more than she could even imagine paying. That day, she did something she never thought she would do. She sold the engagement ring Mark had given her years before. It wasn't much, but it was enough to cover part of the debt. The rest she divided into installments she knew would take years to pay off. Back home, exhausted, Anna sat on the floor with Daniel in her arms. He was breathing better now, smiling, as if nothing had happened. And it was in that contrast, her son's serenity and the weight of the world on her shoulders, that she understood what it truly meant to give up everything. It wasn't just about money or time. It was about giving up pieces of herself, memories, symbols, to ensure her son had a future. The days that followed were even harder. Anna had to intensify her odd jobs, cleaning houses in the mornings, babysitting in the afternoons, and on some nights, making deliveries for a local restaurant. She slept little, had almost no time for herself, but found in Daniel's smile the energy she needed to keep going. In moments of exhaustion, she remembered the elderly woman who had once told her she was stronger than she thought. Maybe it was true. But there were also days when she doubted. Days when she asked herself how much longer she could carry this burden. One of those nights, she wrote in her journal, "I feel like I'm disappearing. But if disappearing means Daniel can live healthy, then I will disappear 1,000 times." The weeks that followed Daniel's illness felt like a constant weight on Anna's shoulders. The bills piled up on the kitchen table reminded her every day of the debt she still had to face. Her body ached, her mind was tired, and at times she felt herself on the verge of breaking down. But Daniel, with his innocent and joyful ways, seemed to carry within him an energy that lit up even the darkest days. When he crawled across the floor with his simple toys, when he laughed out loud at the sight of her face hidden behind a towel, Anna felt something awaken inside her again. One morning, after a particularly difficult night when she barely managed to sleep, Anna went out to take Daniel to a small nearby park. The late winter sun was beginning to melt the snow, and there was something in that cold, crisp air that seemed to give her hope back. She sat on a bench, watching Daniel play with other children. And for the first time in months, she truly smiled. A light, spontaneous smile, as if she had just remembered that life still existed beyond the hardships. A lady walking her dog stopped beside her. "He's beautiful," she said, pointing at Daniel. "Thank you," Anna replied, proud. "Children give us strength, don't they?" the woman continued. "I raised 3 on my own. There were moments I thought I couldn't make it, but today I look at them and know it was all worth it." The words of that stranger stayed engraved in Anna's mind. It was as if the universe, from time to time, sent people to remind her she wasn't alone in her struggle. That night, Anna opened her journal and wrote, "Maybe giving up everything isn't just about losing. Maybe it's about transforming. Turning pain into strength, emptiness into love, fear into courage." From that moment, something shifted. Not that the problems had disappeared. There were still debts, sleepless nights, and the loneliness of raising a child without support. But Anna began to look at herself with more compassion. She allowed herself small moments of joy, a long shower, a hot cup of tea while Daniel slept, a few minutes of reading before turning off the lights. She also found unexpected support. A neighbor, noticing her exhaustion, offered to watch Daniel for a few hours once a week. Anna accepted with gratitude. It wasn't much, but it was enough to catch her breath. With that time, Anna began reflecting on the future. She didn't want to spend her entire life merely surviving. She wanted, somehow, to build something better for herself and her son. One afternoon, while walking with Daniel, she passed by a nursing school. The sign on the door read, "Enrollment open." Anna stopped, looked, and felt her heart race. It was a distant dream, almost impossible under her current circumstances. But for the first time in a long while, she dared to imagine a different tomorrow. That night, she wrote in her journal, "Maybe there is still a path. Maybe giving up everything today is planting something for the future." With that thought, she ended the day by kissing Daniel's forehead as he slept soundly. And as she watched him breathe, she realized that despite all the sacrifices, she had discovered within herself a strength she never thought she possessed. It was only the beginning of a new phase. The days that followed that moment in front of the nursing school were marked by a mixture of hope and fear. Anna knew she couldn't simply enroll and start studying. There were costs, there was time, and there was Daniel. Even so, that possibility rekindled a flame inside her that she had believed was extinguished. One night, as she rocked Daniel in her arms, Anna spoke in a low voice, almost like a secret. "One day, I'll make it. I'll build something for both of us." Of course, Daniel didn't understand. He only smiled, clutching a piece of cloth he used as a toy. But for Anna, that smile was like a silent promise. The months that followed brought new challenges. The medical debts were still there, piling on top of daily expenses. Anna kept working small jobs, but the money always seemed to slip through her fingers. There were weeks when she had to choose between paying the electricity bill or buying enough food. On those nights, she went without dinner herself so Daniel could have a full plate. And yet, amid so much deprivation, Anna began to notice small victories. Daniel was growing healthy. He was learning new words, running through the small apartment with clumsy steps, and his laughter echoed down the hallway. Each milestone was a reminder that all the sacrifices had meaning. It was on a spring afternoon that Anna received an unexpected offer. One of the women she babysat for asked if she would like to care for her children full-time. It would be a steady job, with fixed hours and a monthly paycheck. It wasn't much, but it was more than sporadic odd jobs. Anna hesitated. It would mean spending less time with Daniel, as she would have to leave him with someone else. But it also meant financial security, something she hadn't had in months. That night, she wrote in her journal, "Maybe giving up time with my son is the only way to secure his future. Maybe that is love too." After days of reflection, she accepted the job. The beginning was painful. Leaving Daniel with a trusted neighbor broke her heart. He cried when she left, reaching out his arms for her. Anna walked to work with tears streaming down her face, feeling guilty. But over time, things adjusted. Daniel began to get used to it, and Anna realized that despite the pain, she was doing what was necessary. The steady paycheck allowed her to pay off some overdue bills and refill the fridge. Yet, along with relief came exhaustion. Caring for 3 children all day and then coming home to care for Daniel demanded strength she hadn't known she had. Sometimes she would collapse onto the couch and fall asleep fully dressed without realizing it. It was during this period that Anna began to question how far she could go. One quiet night, after putting Daniel to bed, she wrote in her journal, "I feel like I live just to survive, not to live." But maybe that's what mothers do. Maybe being a mother is accepting to disappear a little so your child can exist fully. The days took on a mechanical rhythm. Anna woke before the sun rose, got Daniel ready, left him at the neighbor's house, and went off to care for the 3 children of the family she worked for. She spent her days chasing after scattered toys, preparing simple meals, and trying to stay calm in the face of tantrums and demands that weren't her own. When she returned home, already exhausted, Daniel would be waiting with his arms wide open. His embrace was the most anticipated moment of the day, but also the most painful. Anna felt she was missing pieces of her son's childhood, moments that would never return. One night, as she tucked Daniel into bed, he spoke his first full sentences. "Mommy, stay. Don't go." Her heart shattered. She smiled so she wouldn't cry, kissed his forehead, and whispered softly, "I always come back, my love. Always." But when she closed the bedroom door, she collapsed onto the couch and let the tears run down her face. That was the constant dilemma. She needed to work to survive, but every hour away from home was an open wound in her heart. The weight of loneliness also grew heavier. With no close friends, no partner, and no time to socialize, Anna felt invisible. Many nights, the only adult conversation she had was with herself, either in front of the mirror or within the pages of her journal. On one of those nights, she wrote, "I'm surrounded by people all day, yet I've never felt so alone." Maybe that's what motherhood does when there's no one to share the burden with. It turns you into an island. And islands don't choose to be isolated. They simply are. Even so, there were small sparks of hope. On some Sundays, she took Daniel to the beach. The cold wind tangled her hair, but watching her son run across the sand, chasing the waves, felt like breathing again. In those moments, Anna felt that, despite everything, she was making it. But her body was beginning to demand its price. She started suffering from frequent headaches, dizziness, and a fatigue that no amount of sleep could erase. There were days she could barely get out of bed, yet she forced herself anyway, because there was no other option. Daniel, in his innocence, sensed something was wrong. One night, he brought her a blanket and tried to cover her while she rested on the couch. Anna smiled through tears and thought, "He's still so little, but he already understands more than he should." That simple gesture was a reminder that her struggle had meaning. That even when she felt like she was falling apart, there was still enough love to keep her standing. It was also during this period that Anna began seriously considering studying. The idea of nursing school had never left her. She knew it wouldn't be easy, she would need a scholarship, and she would have to juggle work, motherhood, and classes. But the thought grew stronger every day, like a stubborn seed searching for light. In her journal, she wrote, "If I don't try, I'll spend my whole life wondering. But if I try, even if I fail, Daniel will know that his mother never gave up. Maybe that's the greatest legacy I can leave." That morning, the sky looked like crumpled paper, gray and heavy over the city. Anna dressed Daniel in 2 shirts and a waterproof jacket, tied his sneakers with almost superstitious care, and checked his backpack 3 times: water bottle, snack, a red toy car. the small blanket he called Moon. On the counter sat a note from the neighbor. "Sorry, Anna. I'm sick. I can't watch Daniel today." It was just a slip of paper, but it weighed like lead. She looked at the clock, mentally calculating the commute time, the delays of the bus, the unpredictable moods of the children she cared for. She took a deep breath. She had no choice. She would take Daniel with her for a few hours and try to improvise. The family she worked for lived in a spacious house, with a backyard that seemed smaller on windy days. Just for today, she repeated to herself, lining up small plates on the table while Daniel played on the rug with his red toy car. 2 hours passed without incident, until the doorbell rang, a delayed grocery delivery. Anna signed, pushed the boxes into the kitchen, and turned to call for Daniel. Silence. The spot where he had been minutes before was empty, the red car lying on its side like a fish out of water. "Daniel?" Her voice came out louder than she intended. Nothing. The wind slammed the back door, and she heard the faint creak of wood. She ran. The backyard was open. The gate, which she swore she had locked, swung back and forth slowly, almost mockingly. Anna's heart burst into a sprint that her whole body was forced to follow. She ran across the lawn, called for Daniel until her throat burned, asked the neighbor's gardener, rushed down the street. Nothing, nothing, nothing. The world narrowed, as if the houses were pressing her shoulders into fear. Someone shouted from a distance, "The beach." The wind carried the smell of salt and urgency, and Anna ran as though stepping through a heavy dream. Cold sand filled her sneakers, the sea was fierce, foaming with anger as waves crashed loudly. In the middle of the beach, a small figure in a blue jacket. Daniel. And in front of him, 2 ambitious waves reaching closer than they should. Daniel. She tore through the distance with his name, the sound coming out mixed with a promise, "Mommy's here." A lifeguard rushed ahead, gesturing for her to stop. "I've got him," he called, running with experienced strides, cutting across the sand as if it were second nature. In seconds that stretched into eternity, the young man reached Daniel, crouched down, lifted him by the arms, pulling him away from the sea's wet tongue. The boy cried, not from fear of the ocean, but from the shock of his mother's scream. Anna collapsed to her knees in the sand, wrapping both of them in her arms. The lifeguard smiled faintly, the weary smile of someone used to negotiating with danger every day, and asked if the little one was okay. "He is," Anna answered with her mouth, trying to convince her heart. At the station, they asked for her name, address, phone number. Protocol. Someone offered water, another person an emergency blanket. Daniel calmed down with the moon blanket she pulled from his backpack, terrified she might not find it. The lifeguard explained that the rip current always appeared when the wind shifted like that children were fascinated and didn't measure distance. Anna nodded as if to say yes, she understood the sea, but inside she thought only that she had failed for minutes, and minutes were enough to ruin everything. The report was filed as required. By the end of the day, back at the apartment with Daniel asleep on the couch, there was a knock at the door, 3 sharp raps. A woman with her hair tied back, an ID badge clipped to her coat pocket, Child Protective Services. The world narrowed once again. "We received an alert," her voice was professional, flat, without edges. "We need to talk about supervision, routines, safety. It's a standard procedure." Of course it was, Anna thought, and standard could be a massive word when applied to what you love most. She explained about the sick neighbor, the unexpected delivery, the gate she swore she had locked. The agent asked questions, wrote down answers, scanned the apartment with the eyes of someone who sees hidden risks. She pointed to outlets, windows, chairs placed too close to high spots. She gave recommendations and, in the end, was direct. We'll be following up for a few weeks. You seem to love your son very much, but we need to ensure he's safe. It's to help. When the door closed, Anna leaned her forehead against it and stayed there for a while, as if the apartment might slip away and she had to hold it still. The real fear wasn't the ocean, she thought, it was the possibility that the world might decide she wasn't enough. She embraced Daniel with deliberate care, feeling the good weight of the sleeping boy, and carried him to bed. His face carried a peace that wounded and healed her at the same time. The next day, the mailman left an envelope with blue borders. It was from the nursing school. Anna opened it with hands trembling from an old weariness and a new kind of hope. Congratulations! You have been accepted. We offer a partial scholarship. Classes begin in 6 weeks. The paper smelled of future. She pressed the letter to her chest as if it were medicine and smiled alone in the kitchen, gazing through the window that framed a patch of clear sky. The smile lasted until the phone vibrated. Daniel's hospital. They said the bill for his stay would be sent to collections with interest, the minimum payment overdue. The smile unraveled almost audibly. On the same pile, a letter from the landlord. We inform you that the building will be sold. Your contract, on a monthly basis, will remain valid for 30 days. We request vacancy at the end of that period. The ground gave way beneath her. Accepted into school. Hospital bill with interest. Technical eviction. The social worker would return to reassess the home's safety. Anna's heart felt like those juggling balls she sometimes saw in the streets, tossed into the air, caught by another hand that also had to keep time. She closed her eyes and, for the first time in a long while, let her head fall onto the table. She only breathed. She only heard Daniel tapping a spoon against a cup in the other room. He laughed. As if joy could sprout in the desert. That same afternoon, she did math like someone trying to translate an unfamiliar language. How many extra hours could she work? How much would a room in another neighborhood cost, even just for a few months? And the remaining tuition at nursing school, even with a partial scholarship? And half-day daycare? There is a kind of math that doesn't fit into a calculator, the kind where a mother's time is divided into pieces that don't add up. At the end of the day, the social worker returned for the first formal visit. Anna organized the apartment as if she were arranging her own heart. She moved chairs away from the windows, put locks on cabinets, labeled medicines, collected small objects, mentally locked the gate 10 times. The agent was kind, almost gentle, but the clipboard was an invisible ruler measuring everything. Do you have a support network? She asked. Anna spoke of her parents, far away, of the neighbor, still recovering, of her job, which, ironically, was caring for other people's children. The woman took notes, nodded, stood. We'll return in 2 weeks. Any changes, call me. It's to help, she repeated. After she left, Anna sat on the living room floor with Daniel in her lap and her notebook on her knee. She wrote slowly, as if the words needed space to fit. Today I feared the sea and the world. I received a yes I've waited years for and two no's that ache in the same place. I don't know how this is done, God. But if there's a path, show me. I'll walk it with wounded feet. In the days that followed, Anna became an engineer of improvisation. She mapped out 3 possible apartments, all small, all far away, all too expensive for what they offered. One was near a community daycare. The director of the daycare had eyes that reminded Anna of the woman from the park, eyes that saw beyond worn clothes. Waitlist, she said, and the word wait weighed like never. But call me every Monday. Sometimes a spot opens suddenly. Anna squeezed her hand as if holding a rope. At work, that week was a spool of identical days. The children cried, laughed, begged for stories. Daniel, at the neighbor's house, better now, though still tired, asked what time his mother would return. Anna began to talk about nursing school to herself in a low voice, as if it were a beautiful secret that couldn't be said aloud for fear of scaring away luck. At night, when Daniel slept, the school's website stayed open on her old laptop, the blue page with photos of bright hallways and people in white coats. She imagined the echo of footsteps, the smell of disinfectant, the first class. And, right after, she imagined Daniel on the other side of some glass, waiting. What would this dream cost? What would it cost not to dream it? Then came the rain. 3 straight days of a patient downpour, the kind that finds its way through even the most stubborn walls. On the second day, a leak opened above Daniel's bedroom window. Anna set down a bowl, then another, then a towel to catch what the dripping missed. She called the landlord. He said, the building's being sold, it's not worth fixing now. What dripped wasn't just water, it was an eviction notice in disguise. She moved the crib away from the wall, built an improvised camp in the living room, mattress on the floor, pillows, whispered stories. Daniel thought it was fun, as if sleeping in the living room were an adventure. Anna smiled at him, but inside she felt a thread snap. On the morning of the 4th day, the wind swept the clouds away like curtains. In the same motion, it swept away the illusion that time would solve things for her. Anna decided she needed a gesture. She called the old owner of the garage where Mark used to work. She hadn't spoken to him in months, not since Mark had disappeared completely from their lives. The man answered with a voice like aged wood. Mark doesn't come around here, he said, before she even asked. If he does, I'll tell him you need to talk. Anna took a breath. Actually, I need something else. I need to sell some equipment, and only then realized she had no equipment to sell, just courage. Or maybe see if anyone knows someone renting a room cheap, just for a few months. The man cleared his throat, thought a moment, gave her a name, an address, a maybe. And maybe was already a piece of ground beneath her feet. That same afternoon, the school's letter returned to her hands, not as paper, but as a phone call. We need to confirm your spot by Friday, said a kind voice. Otherwise, we'll call someone from the waiting list. Friday. She looked at the calendar. Friday was like a lamppost at the end of the street, visible, but you still had to walk through the dark to reach it. On Thursday, the social worker made her second visit. She saw the leak, the improvised bed, the inner gate with a new lock. The condition of the property doesn't help, she said, jotting notes. And the 30-day notice of vacancy. The silence ended where Anna feared. Do you have a housing plan to present next week? She nodded with a head that said yes and a chest that said no. "I'm close," she murmured, and close is sometimes a euphemism for I'm begging the universe. That night, Daniel had another fever. Not as high as the last time, but stubborn enough to push fear down the hallway. Anna held him in her arms, his face burning as if holding a small son. She clasped his hand and, in a whisper, spoke things only mothers understand, promises that don't fit into contracts. The fever eased by dawn, and she hadn't slept. She brewed strong coffee and faced the stack of letters on the table, the school, the hospital bill, the eviction notice. Friday was born with the sound of garbage trucks and the smell of fresh bread from the bakery on the corner. She opened the window to the cold air, which came in like advice. By late morning, a message arrived. The community daycare had an unexpected opening, but only for half days, and even with the low fee, it was still a fee. "If you want it, you need to confirm today," the text read. Today. Friday. The school also needed an answer. Time had decided to collide the clocks to test her courage. Anna made a list of pros and cons on a scrap of paper that had already been half of another list. There were no pros and cons, just two different kinds of love, two electricity bills waiting for payment, two beginnings that demanded endings of something else. She called the school and asked for a few hours. She called the daycare and said, "Maybe, please wait for me until the end of the day." She laid Daniel down for a nap and watched his breathing, thinking the most beautiful sound in the world is a child's chest rising and falling, as if learning to converse with the air. That afternoon, she crossed the city to see the room the garage owner had mentioned. It was small, with a window that opened onto a geometric sky of wires and rooftops, but it had a firm lock on the door and an honest silence. The crib would fit, a mattress, a dresser. Most of all, it would fit two people trying to set life straight. The rent was still high, but the landlady, a woman with a floral scarf wrapped around her head, said she could split the first month's payment in 2 installments. "I have a grandson," she explained, as if the word grandson were a key that unlocked doors for unknown mothers. Anna came home with tired legs and an alert heart. She opened her notebook and wrote, without paying much attention to her handwriting, "Sometimes life puts all the answers on the same day." Not to make things easier, but to ask, "How much do you want it?" She looked up and saw Daniel awake, sitting on the mattress, the moon blanket over his shoulders. He asked, with the simple logic of someone who measures the world by presents, "Mommy, are we staying here?" She didn't have a ready answer. What she had was a desire to stay wherever safety could fit. When night fell, the nursing school sent another message, final call for confirmation. The daycare, right after, another family is interested. We need an answer. The social worker called to schedule the final reassessment for the following week. The landlord sent a reminder of the move-out deadline. For paths demanding steps all at once. Anna held the phone as one holds a lit match. The time to decide is the time of the flame. She breathed, looked at her son, and understood that her entire story until then had been one long lesson about the meaning of letting go. Sometimes it meant giving up a symbol, sometimes selling a ring, sometimes sleeping in the living room, sometimes saying yes when she wanted to say no. Sometimes letting go meant choosing which dream had to wait while she saved the one with a face and a name. The phone vibrated again. Anna closed her eyes for a second, as if asking her fear for permission. And she pressed call. The phone was still warm in her hand when the decision took shape inside her. She knew she couldn't say yes to everything. It was impossible. Each choice was also a renunciation, and at that moment life demanded that she learn the hardest art of motherhood, sacrificing parts of herself in silence. She called the nursing school first. The woman's voice sounded kind, almost cheerful, as if offering a door to a promising future. Anna took a deep breath before answering. "I can't start this semester." The word no came out heavy, dragging dreams with it. "But please, keep me on the list. I will come back." On the other end, there was a brief silence, followed by understanding. "Of course, ma'am. We understand." Anna hung up, and the room felt bigger, as if the echo of that no still lingered on the walls. For a moment, she felt shattered. The image of herself in a white coat, walking through bright hallways, vanished like smoke. But when she turned her head, she saw Daniel playing with his red toy car on the floor. He looked up at her and smiled, and in that smile was the answer to all her pain. It wasn't time to think of herself. Then she called the daycare. "Yes, I'll take the spot." This time, her voice was steady. "He starts Monday." On the other end, the director confirmed the details, and Anna felt a wave of relief mixed with fear. She knew it meant more work, more rushing, but it also meant Daniel would have a safe place while she searched for new ways to provide. That same night, she wrote in her journal, "Today I gave up one dream to protect another. It hurt, but I know it was the right choice." Maybe that's what being a mother is, keeping your own desires in your pocket so your children can carry theirs in their hearts. In the days that followed, Anna began to prepare the move into the small room offered by the woman with the floral scarf. The space was modest, almost suffocating for two, but the walls were solid and the roof didn't leak. She carried boxes improvised from bags and crates, filled with clothes, books, and toys. She sold what wouldn't fit, donated what had no monetary value. Every object left behind was another proof of letting go. On the last day in the old apartment, Anna walked through the empty rooms holding Daniel's hand. He ran from one side to the other, laughing at the echo of his own footsteps. For him, it was an adventure. For her, it was a farewell. She touched the peeling walls, remembered the sleepless nights, the small laughs, the hidden tears. That space had been the stage of her battle and, in a way, part of her identity. But now it was time to move on. In the new home, she improvised a little corner for Daniel, the crib beside her bed, the toys arranged in a colorful box, the moon blanket hung like a flag over the back of a chair. He adapted quickly, and that brought Anna an unexpected comfort. But the difficulties continued. The nanny job took up more and more hours, and her body complained. The headaches became more frequent, and her hands began to tremble from exhaustion. Still, she kept going. The social worker came back for another visit and found the new apartment organized, Daniel healthy and smiling. "I see progress," she said, writing on her clipboard. "Keep it up." Those simple words worked like a balm. Anna felt validated, as if someone had finally acknowledged the weight she carried. That night, she wrote, "Today I realized that letting go doesn't make me smaller. It makes me bigger, even if I can't see it. It's as if each renunciation were an invisible stitch, keeping my life together even when it seems torn." And for the first time in a long time, she fell asleep with a sense of peace. The weeks after the move felt like crossing a fragile bridge every day. The rented room seemed smaller each morning, as if the walls were silently closing in. There was space only for the essentials, and Anna had to balance herself between stacked boxes, clothes hanging from improvised racks, and toys scattered across the floor. But as cramped as it was a safe place. And at that moment, safety was worth more than space. The nanny work intensified. The family she worked for began to depend on her more and more, extending the schedule on days of unexpected commitments. Anna accepted, because every extra hour meant more money to keep Daniel fed and the bills paid. But her body began to show clear signs of exhaustion. The headaches became routine, her back protested with every movement, and on some nights her arms felt too weak even to hold her son. Still, there were moments that kept her standing. When she picked Daniel up from daycare, his smile lit up everything. He ran toward her, tripping over his own feet, and threw himself into her arms as if the entire world fit there. It was in those instants Anna understood, despite everything, she was making it. But life seemed to test her limits relentlessly. One night, returning home after an especially long day, she found a note pinned to the door. The rent was overdue. The landlady, though understanding, needed her to settle the payment within a few days. Anna looked at the note, felt her chest tighten, and wondered how many battles she still had to fight. Around the same time, Daniel became sick again. A sudden fever left him fragile and tearful. Anna spent the night awake, changing cool compresses, checking his temperature every hour. The fear returned in full force, reminding her of the previous hospitalization, the hospital bill, the feeling of helplessness. In the silence of the early hours, holding her feverish son in her arms, Anna whispered, "If I could, I'd take this fever for myself. I'd take all the pain, just so you'd feel nothing." And in a way, that was exactly what she had been doing, carrying in her body and in her soul the weights she didn't want him to face. In the days that followed, the fever subsided. Daniel went back to playing, to smiling, as if nothing had happened. But Anna was different. Exhaustion had reached a dangerous point. At work, she nearly fainted while preparing a snack for the children. She was caught by the mother of the family, who insisted she see a doctor. Anna refused, saying she was just tired. Deep down, she knew she had neither the time nor the money to care for herself. That same week, the social worker returned. She found Anna visibly worn down, but Daniel healthy and cheerful. "You need to take care of yourself too," she said firmly. "You can't save your son if you're destroyed." The words echoed in her mind. She knew they were true, but how? How could she find time, resources, energy for herself when everything was directed toward Daniel? That night, she opened her journal and wrote with trembling letters, "I am at my limit. I feel I could break at any moment. But when I look at Daniel, I remember I don't have the right to break. Maybe my strength doesn't come from me, but from the love I feel for him. And if that love is infinite, maybe I can endure a little longer." It was at that point something shifted. Anna realized she could no longer ignore her own health. She decided that, even in the middle of chaos, she needed to create small rituals for herself. She began reserving 10 minutes before bed to breathe deeply, write in her journal, or simply drink a cup of tea in silence. Small gestures, almost insignificant, but they reminded her that she still existed as a person. The peak of exhaustion came on a rainy afternoon. Carrying heavy grocery bags, she felt her body give way. Her legs shook, her vision darkened, and she nearly collapsed in the middle of the street. A neighbor helped her home. Daniel, frightened, held her hand tightly, repeating, "Mommy, don't sleep, don't sleep." Anna cried, not from physical pain, but from the realization that she was approaching a dangerous breaking point. That night, looking at her sleeping son, she made a silent decision: she could not go on like this. She needed to rebuild herself, not only for her own sake, but because Daniel deserved a whole mother, not just fragments surviving. The morning after the near collapse in the street, Anna woke up different. Her body still hurt, but inside her was a kind of quiet determination. As if, by touching the edge, she had found a line she could not cross again. She made coffee, prepared Daniel's breakfast, and while he played with the red car, she sat with her journal. She wrote, "If I keep going like this, I'll break. And if I break, he breaks too. I need to learn to care for myself, even if only in pieces." From that day on, she decided to introduce small routines of self-care. 10 minutes of breathing before bed. 5 minutes of reading in the morning, even if just a single page. A glass of water upon waking, as a symbol of beginning again. They were simple gestures, almost invisible, but they worked like new roots in tired soil. Daniel seemed to sense the change. He became even more affectionate, hugging her out of nowhere, covering her with the moon blanket when he saw her lying down. Anna wondered how such a small child could hold so much wisdom. Perhaps because, deep down, love is a language that needs no age. At work, she was still exhausted, but she began to set boundaries. When the family tried to extend her hours too much, she firmly explained that she needed to go home. She discovered that saying no was also a way of protecting Daniel, because only by being present could she ensure he grew up with the love he deserved. One afternoon, when picking him up from daycare, she met a teacher who praised the boy. "He's very intelligent, curious, always asks why things are the way they are. You must be proud." Anna smiled, her eyes welling with tears. Proud wasn't enough. Daniel was living proof that every effort, every pain, was worth it. That night, she wrote, "He is my greatest gift. My greatest reason. My greatest future. Maybe I don't need to be perfect. I just need to be enough. And enough, when you love, can be everything." That thought was the first brick in a reconstruction still far from complete, but it already showed there was hope. The following weeks brought a new rhythm. Anna no longer woke just to survive, but to live each day with small intentions. The fatigue remained, the bills were still a battle, but something in her had shifted. Now there was purpose in every gesture. The first victory came unexpectedly. A neighbor who knew of her effort recommended her to a friend who needed someone trustworthy to clean small offices 3 times a week. The pay was fair, better than the extra hours she earned as a nanny. Anna accepted. Splitting herself into yet another job seemed impossible, but with daycare secured, she managed to organize her schedule. At the end of the first month, when she received her payment, she cried. For the first time in a long time, she was able not only to pay rent but also reduce part of the hospital debt. The receipt with the lowered balance felt like a war medal. Around the same time, Daniel surprised her at daycare. During a small presentation, he recited short verses the teacher had taught. Anna, sitting among other parents, felt her chest swell like never before. The boy pronounced each word with a pride that reflected directly back on her. After the presentation, the teacher approached her. "Your son has talent, Anna. He learns quickly, pays attention, he's sensitive. That's a reflection of you. She smiled, almost unable to believe it. For so long she had felt insufficient, invisible, a failure. And now she heard that her son was shining, and that his light came from her. That night, she wrote in her journal, "Today I saw my son on stage. Small, but giant in my eyes. Maybe this is the victory that matters, seeing him grow safe, confident, happy. If he shines, it's because my sacrifices lit the way." Another victory came with the next visit from the social worker. Entering the small but tidy room, seeing Daniel healthy and smiling, the woman closed her clipboard with a different gesture. "The case will be closed. You're doing well." Anna felt a wave of relief she hadn't felt in months. It wasn't just about bureaucracy. It was confirmation that she was on the right path, that she was enough, that no one could take away her right to be a mother. That same week, she achieved something even more symbolic. She set aside $50 in a small tin box, her first savings since Daniel had been born. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. A reminder that she could, indeed, build a future, even if slowly. Daniel, curious, asked what was inside the box. Anna explained it was a treasure they would keep for both of them. The boy smiled and placed inside a small stone he had found at the beach. "For luck," he said. That simple gesture was proof they were building something together, mother and son, step by step. That weekend, Anna took Daniel to the beach. The ocean, which had once been the stage of fear, now seemed like a setting for new beginnings. They ran along the sand, laughed together, and Anna realized that despite all the sacrifices, there was still space for happiness. As they walked hand in hand, she looked at the horizon and thought, "Maybe I don't have everything, but I have enough." And enough may be the most beautiful form of abundance. The opportunity came as seasons change, not with fireworks, but with a different wind tapping at the window. It was the neighbor's friend, the same one who had recommended her for the office cleaning, who mentioned, in a hurried hallway conversation, that the clinic where her husband worked needed someone for the night shift, general assistant, support with patients, organizing supplies, small administrative tasks. The pay was better. There were benefits. And, what made Anna's heart race, the clinic had a partnership with a technical school that granted scholarships to employees after 3 months. "You have hands that know how to care," the woman said, handing her a contact card. "Try. At worst, it's a no." Anna looked at the card as one might hold a lit match in the wind. "At worst, it's a no," she repeated to herself, but she already felt the spark of a maybe. That night, when Daniel fell asleep with the moon blanket on his shoulder, she opened her journal. Night work. Better pay. Possible scholarship. Risk, lack of sleep, exhaustion, daycare doesn't cover nights. Advantage, bridge. I need a bridge. The bridge had tolls. Daycare closed at 6. The neighbor, with her fragile health, couldn't take on entire nights. The landlady, the woman with the floral scarf, listened to her story leaning against the doorway and simply said, as if offering a glass of water, "I'll stay with him 2 nights a week, if that helps. I'm a light sleeper, and I like the sound of a child breathing." Anna almost said, "I can't accept." Instead, she held the woman's hand and answered with the truth. "You're saving 2 people." The next day, she applied for the job with a resume that felt small compared to the size of her will. In the experience field, she wrote care and wanted to detail sleepless nights, fevers measured every hour, bottles washed, cries soothed against her chest. She left only nanny, cleaning services, domestic support. The rest, she thought, her eyes would show. The interview took place in a narrow hallway, between doors with silver plaques and the smell of antiseptic. The personnel manager, a man with rectangular glasses and a gentle voice, was accompanied by the head nurse. "The shift is tough," the nurse warned bluntly. 12 hours on, 36 off. Lots of walking, lots of stairs, lots to learn quickly. "I can learn," Anna replied simply. "Do you have a young child?" the manager asked. "Yes. He's the reason I'm here." The ward breathed with the sound of machines and whispers. While waiting for the response, Anna watched, through a pane of glass, a scene both ordinary and sacred, an aide carefully straightening the blanket of an elderly man, speaking slowly, as if combing time itself. A sweet knot formed in her throat. This was where she wanted to be. This was what, one day, she longed to do with authority, with a lab coat, with knowledge, not just instinct. The answer came in the form of a short email, approved in the process. Documents on Monday. She read it, reread it, closed her eyes. Her body trembled with an emotion that felt like electricity. She wanted to scream, but Daniel was asleep. So she sat on the floor and cried softly, the kind of cry that washes rather than weighs. And then, the pieces began to move. The landlady arranged for 2 nights. The neighbor, now in better health, would take a third when needed. On the remaining nights, Anna would keep a reduced day job, a temporary arrangement so the bills wouldn't collapse while she crossed the bridge. Was it a house of cards? Yes. But it had engineering, schedules and spreadsheets, alarms on her phone, notes stuck to the fridge, reading water, medicine, call daycare. On her first night at work, she put on a simple uniform and tied her hair back as if tying courage itself. Daniel found the nighttime goodbye strange. "Mommy, are you going to work when the stars turn on?" "Yes, my love. People need care at night too." "And me?" "You'll stay with Scarf Grandma and sleep. When the sun wakes up, I'll be here." He pressed the moon blanket to her cheek, as if blessing her. "Take a piece of the moon with you." Anna smiled. "I'll keep it in my pocket." The hospital had a rhythm the body learns with its ears, wheels of stretchers, measured beeps, hurried footsteps, and others so light they seemed to float. In the first hours, the avalanche of instructions sounded like a new language. Restock compresses, go to medication distribution, bring down a wheelchair to 203, notifying nursing of the incident. She wrote everything down, drew arrows, checked the map of the wards twice, 3 times. At 3 in the morning, she helped turn a patient with the care of someone turning her own destiny. At 4, she brought water to a weary-eyed companion who whispered thank you as if asking permission to exist. At 5, a muffled cry in the pediatric ward asked for presence, not technique. Anna sat beside the bed, held a small hand, told a short story about beaches and moons that fit in your pocket. The boy fell asleep. The head nurse, passing by, saw from a distance and nodded silently. At dawn, she left her shift with aching legs but a new peace in her chest. Outside, the air smelled of bread and beginnings. Her phone buzzed, a message from the technical school affiliated with the hospital, confirming that after the trial period, there would be an internal selection process for partial scholarships. "The journey is long," the text read. But it begins with the first shift. She arrived home with the sun rising behind the rooftops and found Daniel sitting by the bed, combing the moon blanket with his fingers. You came back. I came back. The sun came with you. Whenever I can, it will be like this. She slept 2 hours and woke to prepare a simple lunch for the two of them. There was exhaustion deep in her bones, but beneath it moved something like joy. Not euphoria, calm joy, the kind that sustains. That afternoon, she paid rent with the hospital's advance. Then she opened the little tin box and added coins until she reached the fee for the scholarship process. Daniel took the lucky stone and rubbed it against the application form, as if polishing the future. Now it's going to work, he decreed, with the authority only children have. The following week, routine showed both its claws and its wings. There were easy nights and nights of storm, mornings when Anna swore she wouldn't get up, and yet she did, afternoons of laughter at daycare, Daniel's mom is here, and messages from the hospital asking for extra shifts. At every hint of the day, she decided, sometimes automatically, sometimes in prayer, what she could say yes or no to so the fragile castle wouldn't collapse. It was in this back and forth that another note from fate arrived. The head nurse called Anna into the break room. I heard you dream of nursing. Anna nodded. We have an informal mentoring program for aides who want to grow. It's not official, it promises nothing, but I can teach you what I can between tasks. If you bring questions, I'll bring paths. I'll bring questions, Anna said, and felt the phrase was also a vow. I bring myself. That night, in her journal, she wrote, a door. Small, but real. Life didn't open a gate, it gave me a latch. I know how to open latches. She closed the notebook and looked at Daniel asleep, his mouth slightly open, the moon blanket half fallen, his chest rising and falling like a calm sea. She found herself crying without sadness, crying because it hurt and healed at the same time. Because by choosing the bridge, she had also chosen to cross it hand in hand with her son, even when the wind blew against them. The first month at the hospital ended like running a marathon without training. Anna endured sleepless nights, exhausted mornings, and afternoons heavy with responsibilities, but she survived. Inside her chest was something new, a dignity born not from perfection but from persistence. The problem is that life rarely lets you breathe for long. On a gray Tuesday, the unexpected test arrived. The daycare director called. Anna, we need to talk. Daniel had an asthma attack today. He's medicated, he's okay, but it's important you take him to the doctor and follow up. Anna's heart dropped like a glass to the floor. She immediately picked up her son and ran to the clinic. The pediatrician explained, in a calm voice, that it wasn't serious if there was constant care, proper medication, a clean environment. But there were costs, expensive medicines, a personal inhaler, frequent visits. That night, Anna sat by Daniel's bed, watching his breathing. The faint wheeze reminded her of every night of fever past. She held her journal and wrote, I thought I was finally making it, and now life reminds me I can never lower my guard. But if the fight has grown, the strength must grow too. The dilemma, however, was cruel: how to reconcile the hospital job, the schedules, the counted money, with Daniel's new health needs. In the days that followed, everything seemed to unravel. The hospital manager asked her to cover 2 extra shifts. The neighbor, tired, said she couldn't watch Daniel that week. The landlady, always helpful, suddenly fell ill and had to step back. And in the middle of it all, Daniel's medicines weighed in her pocket like lead. Anna felt panic strike. For the first time in a long time, she thought about quitting the hospital job. Maybe it would be better to return to the safe but poorly paid, predictable nanny work. Maybe the dream would have to wait indefinitely. In a dawn full of doubts, she went out to walk to the beach, leaving Daniel asleep under the neighbor's care. The cold wind cut her face, and the sea roared like a mirror of the turmoil inside her. There, alone before the immensity, Anna spoke out loud. "I can't lose again. I can't lose everything again." The waves answered only with foam, but inside her, something solidified. She realized she was no longer the same woman who had once cried silently in the old apartment. She had endured winter, debt, illness, abandonment, leaks, and sleepless nights. There was no bridge she couldn't cross. At the hospital, she sought out the head nurse. She explained Daniel's situation, the night shifts, the difficulty of balancing everything. She expected judgment, maybe indifference. Instead, she found humanity. "Anna, you are valuable here," the woman said firmly. "We can adjust your schedule. It may not be easy, but we won't let you face this alone." It was the first time someone at work had seen her not just as another employee, but as a mother, as a human being. That night, back home, Anna held Daniel tighter than ever. "We're going to get through this, my love. I promise." And in her journal, she wrote, "Today I faced my deepest fear, not being enough. And I discovered that being enough doesn't mean never failing. It means continuing to try, even when everything conspires against you." That moment marked the beginning of the end of her story. Anna was no longer the same. She was now ready for the conclusion, not perfect, not without pain, but inspiring. Months passed since that night of inner storm. Anna was no longer just a survivor, she was a full-time warrior. The routine was still hard, but a thread of dignity now stitched each day together. Daniel, now older, was learning to live with asthma. The inhaler became part of the routine, almost like a toy he accepted without fear. Anna taught him not to see the illness as a prison, but as a detail of life. "You are strong, my love," she always told him. "Stronger than you know." At the hospital, Anna earned respect. Not because of the simple uniform, but because of the way she treated every patient. She was the first to arrive when someone cried alone, the last to leave when an elderly patient needed company to face the night. One evening, the head nurse confided, "You have something that can't be taught in any course, Anna. You have a soul for caring." Those words followed her even into her dreams. Slowly, small signs of victory appeared. Daniel's hospital debt, once a massive shadow, was finally paid off. The final receipt felt like a passport to breathe deeply after so much suffocation. Rent, once a constant source of fear, was now paid on time. And on an autumn afternoon, Anna placed a larger amount than ever into the little tin box. Daniel added another lucky stone. "Now we have two," he said, smiling. "Double luck." But the greatest victory wasn't in money. It was in her son's eyes. Daniel was growing up confident, joyful, knowing he was loved above all else. A direct reflection of the mother who, even at her limit, never gave up. It was in this moment that the technical school sent an unexpected invitation, applications open for partial nursing scholarships. Limited spots. Anna's heart raced. It was the chance she had once postponed, the door she had closed in the past to protect Daniel. Now, maybe, it was time. She sat with her journal open and wrote, "I don't know if I have the strength for one more fight. But I know that if I don't try, I will teach my son to give up on his own dreams. And I cannot allow that. He needs to see that letting go is not the same as giving up. That there is a time for everything. Maybe now is mine." On enrollment day, Daniel went with her to the modest school building. He looked at the colorful poster and asked, "Mommy, are you going to study?" "Yes, my love. To take even better care of people." He smiled and reached out his hand. "Then I'll study with you." Anna filled out the forms with steady hands. She handed over documents, listened to explanations, received a calendar. The path would be long, full of obstacles, but it no longer seemed impossible. That night, as she tucked Daniel into bed, she felt a different kind of peace. Not the peace of having no problems, they were still there, in piles of bills, in exhausting shifts, in sleepless nights. But the peace of knowing she was on the right path. She looked at her son and thought of everything she had left behind, the old career, the quiet youth, the easy life she might have had if she had made other choices. She realized she had let go of almost everything. And yet, she had gained something no one could ever take away, a love greater than life itself, a strength born of pain, a courage that turned every sacrifice into victory. In her journal, she wrote the final entry of that chapter. "I am not the woman I once dreamed of being. I am more. I am a mother. I am proof that letting go is not losing, it is finding a greater purpose. One day, Daniel will understand. And when he does, I hope he sees in me not just someone who fought, but someone who loved him above all else." And then, she closed the notebook with tears in her eyes, but also a smile on her lips. The camera of life seemed to pull back, showing Anna sitting in a small room, Daniel sleeping peacefully beside her, the moon blanket fallen on the floor. The world was still hard, but inside that space there was something unbreakable, hope. And so, the story reaches you. Anna gave up everything, time, dreams, parts of herself, so her son could have a chance. And now, I ask you, what would you do in her place?